August 21, 1942. The Iwo River, Guadalcanal, Solomon Islands. In the humid darkness before dawn, approximately 917 men of the Ichiki Detachment prepared for what they believed would be a decisive assault. Colonel Tenaru Ichiki had led these soldiers from their garrison at Midway Island to Guadalcanal, with orders to recapture the airfield the Americans had seized 2 weeks earlier. Japanese intelligence estimated only about 2,000 demoralized Marines held the position. Ichiki's force, they believed, would be more than adequate. At approximately 01:30 hours, the attack began. Japanese infantry charged across the sandbar at the mouth of Alligator Creek, which American maps incorrectly labelled the Tenaru River. They advanced with bayonets fixed, confident that speed and fighting spirit would carry them through any resistance. What happened next would become a template for the Pacific War. The night exploded with automatic weapons fire. Marines of the 1st Battalion, 1st Marines, had established defensive positions with interlocking fields of fire centred on M1919 Browning machine guns. The attackers ran directly into streams of sustained automatic fire. Tracers cut through the darkness in continuous arcs. Men fell by the dozen, then by the score, then by the 100. Those few who reached the American wire encountered defensive fires so intense that penetration proved impossible. Throughout the night, wave after wave of Japanese infantry attacked. Each wave was systematically destroyed by machine gun fire. By dawn on August 21st, approximately 800 Japanese soldiers lay dead. Only 128 members of Ichiki's original force survived. The Marines suffered 34 dead and 75 wounded. Colonel Ichiki, witnessing the destruction of his regiment, committed suicide. This battle was not an anomaly. It was the first clear demonstration of a firepower advantage so overwhelming that Japanese victory in the Pacific had already become mathematically impossible. The weapons that inflicted this destruction, the M1919 and M2 Browning machine guns, represented industrial and technological superiority that would prove decisive across 3 years of Pacific combat. The story of these weapons begins with their designer, John Moses Browning. Born in 1855 in Ogden, Utah, Browning had been designing firearms since the 1870s. By World War I, he had already revolutionized small arms design multiple times. His automatic pistol became the M1911. His automatic rifle evolved into the Browning automatic rifle, but his machine gun designs would prove most influential. The M1917 water-cooled machine gun, Browning's first heavy machine gun for US service, arrived too late for significant World War I combat. Approximately 68,000 were manufactured before the November 1918 armistice, but most never reached France. The weapon demonstrated remarkable reliability in testing, firing the .30-06 Springfield cartridge at approximately 500 rounds per minute. However, the complete system with water jacket, tripod and ammunition weighed over 90 pounds and required a crew of 6 men. After the war, military planners recognized that future conflicts required more mobile automatic weapons. The water-cooled system, while effective, was too heavy and required constant water supply. Browning's solution was characteristically practical: remove the water jacket entirely, increase barrel thickness to compensate through air cooling, and maintain the proven short recoil operating mechanism. Development through the 1920s produced several variants. The M1919A1, introduced in 1931, was designed for tank mounting. The M1919A2, developed for cavalry, featured a shorter 18-inch barrel and special tripod. These early versions proved the concept but were produced in limited quantities while engineers refined the design. The M1919A4, with final specifications completed in 1936, became the definitive version. The weapon weighed 31 pounds without its M2 tripod, which added another 14 pounds. Overall length measured 41 inches with a 24-inch barrel. The cyclic rate of fire ranged from 400 to 600 rounds per minute, depending on specific configuration and ammunition type. Effective range exceeded 1,500 meters when tripod mounted with proper sighting. At typical Pacific combat ranges of 200 to 400 meters, accuracy was devastating. The M1919A4 used a belt feed system, accepting either cloth or metal link belts. Standard belts contained 250 rounds, though multiple belts could be linked for continuous fire. The air-cooled barrel required changing after sustained fire, typically after firing 500 to 800 rounds continuously. The barrel change procedure required approximately 30 seconds with a trained crew. The weapon fired from a closed bolt using short recoil operation, proven reliable in the M1917. Most importantly for wartime production, the design used standardized parts with tolerances allowing mass production without hand-fitting. Any M1919A4 produced in any factory would accept parts from any other M1919A4. This interchangeability proved crucial when American industry mobilized for war. The M2.50 caliber Browning represented a quantum leap in machine gun firepower. Development began in 1918 when General John J. Pershing requested a heavy machine gun capable of penetrating light armor and engaging aircraft. The French had demonstrated the 11mm Hotchkiss machine gun's effectiveness in these roles, but American forces lacked equivalent weapons. Browning and Winchester. Repeating Arms developed the .50 Browning machine gun cartridge, commonly known as .50 BMG. This massive round measured 12.7mm in diameter and 99mm in overall length. The projectile weighed between 620 to 710 grains, depending on type, compared to 150 grains, for .30-06. Muzzle energy exceeded 13,000 foot-pounds, more than 6 times the .30-06's energy. The M2 adopted in 1933 established the basic design. The M2 HB heavy barrel variant, perfected in 1938, became standard. The weapon weighed 84 pounds for the receiver group, plus 44 pounds for the tripod. Total system weight of 128 pounds required crew transport and operation. The cyclic rate ranged from 450 to 575 rounds per minute. Maximum effective range exceeded 2,000 meters. The weapon could engage area targets beyond 7,000 meters. The 50 BMG came in several variants. The M2 ball round could penetrate 0.75 inches of armor steel at 547 yards. The armor-piercing round featured tungsten carbide cores penetrating 0.875 inches of hardened steel at 200 yards. Armor-piercing incendiary rounds combined penetration with incendiary effects. Against infantry, the results were catastrophic. The massive kinetic energy produced wounds that were invariably fatal. Near misses could cause injury through hydrostatic shock alone. Against fortifications, the M2 could penetrate coconut log bunkers, palm tree trunks, and sandbag walls, stopping rifle fire. Against light vehicles, small boats, and aircraft, effectiveness was equally impressive. The weapon could destroy machine gun nests, disable artillery, and suppress any target within considerable range. Both weapons were specifically designed for mass production. Every part met precise specifications. Every tolerance allowed rapid manufacturing with standard machine tools. This meant American industry could produce these weapons in unprecedented quantities once war began. By December 1941, American arsenals contained tens of thousands of M1919 and M2 machine guns. Rock Island Arsenal in Illinois had been producing them steadily since the 1920s. After Pearl Harbor, production transformed from steady to overwhelming. The War Production Board converted civilian industrial capacity to military production. Companies that had never manufactured firearms were contracted to produce machine guns. General Motors' Saginaw steering gear division in Saginaw, Michigan provides the definitive example. This facility had produced automotive steering components since 1906. Workers knew precision manufacturing but had never made firearms. Engineers from Rock Island Arsenal arrived with blueprints and specifications. Within 6 months, Saginaw was producing M1919 machine guns. By 1943, production reached thousands monthly. By war's end, Saginaw had produced over 370,000 M1919 machine guns. Buffalo Arms Corporation in Buffalo, New York, followed a similar path. After conversion to war production, Buffalo Arms produced over 100,000 M1919 machine guns. Other contractors contributed thousands more. Total M1919 production during World War II reached approximately 438,971 units across all variants. The M1919A foreground version accounted for the majority. This number excluded water-cooled M1917S remaining in service, aircraft-mounted AN/M2 variants, and specialized versions. American industry produced enough weapons to equip every infantry division multiple times over, with thousands more for vehicles, ships, and aircraft. M2.50 caliber production followed similar patterns. Multiple contractors produced these weapons, with total production exceeding 400,000 units by war's end. This included both M2 HB ground versions and lighter AN/M2 aircraft versions. To understand the advantage these numbers created, consider Japanese production. The Type 92 heavy machine gun, Japan's primary heavy machine gun, was designed by Kijiro Nambu. The weapon entered service in 1932, with the designation referring to Japanese Imperial Year 2592. The Type 92 was essentially a scaled-up Type 3 heavy machine gun based on the French Hotchkiss M1914 design. The Type 92 fired the 7.7 by 58 mm cartridge, roughly equivalent to British .303 in power. Total production from 1932 until production ceased in 1941 reached approximately 45,000 units. This represented not a slight disadvantage, but an overwhelming disparity. American industry produced machine guns at rates exceeding 20 times Japanese capacity. The Type 92 itself suffered significant limitations. The complete weapon with tripod weighed 55 kilograms, 121 pounds, compared to the M1919's 45 pounds. This weight required more men for transport, typically 6 to 8 soldiers versus 3 or 4 for an M1919. The Type 92 fired at 450 rounds per minute, comparable to the M1919 on paper. However, the ammunition feed system created critical differences. While the M1919 used belts allowing continuous fire, the Type 92 used 30-round rigid metal strips requiring manual insertion and removal. Each strip change took several seconds, creating fire gaps that American weapons did not suffer. The ammunition strips required factory oiling for proper feeding. This oil attracted dirt and jungle debris in tropical conditions. When strips became contaminated, the feeding mechanism jammed. Japanese machine gunners learned to meticulously clean each strip before loading, adding seconds during combat reloads. The distinctive sound of the Type 92 became identifying. American Marines recognized the slow, methodical woodpecker chatter, distinctly different from the M1919's faster, sustained fire. This sound identified Japanese positions and indicated reload periods, creating maneuver opportunities. Beyond weapon limitations, Japanese production could not match American output. Even at peak rates before 1941 cessation, Japanese arsenals struggled to fully equip frontline units. Many infantry battalions deployed with fewer machine guns than doctrine specified. Supply lines across thousands of ocean miles, constantly attacked by submarines, made replacement nearly impossible. American production created abundance where weapons became nearly disposable. Worn barrels were replaced from depot stocks. Damaged weapons were immediately replaced. Lost equipment was resupplied within days. This abundance fundamentally changed employment tactics. The disparity extended to ammunition production. The Lake City Army Ammunition Plant in Missouri, one of several facilities, produced more .30-06 ammunition monthly than Japanese industry produced annually. By 1943, American production exceeded 5 billion .30-06 rounds annually. Production of .50 BMG reached similar levels. A single American infantry division carried more machine gun ammunition than entire Japanese armies possessed. Ammunition abundance encouraged liberal use. Commanders authorized reconnaissance by fire where suspicious areas would be saturated to provoke enemy response. Japanese ammunition supply was perpetually inadequate. Frontline units faced severe shortages. Machine gun crews received specific instructions limiting fire. A captured Japanese infantry manual stated, "The machine gunner must exercise fire discipline at all times. Ammunition is precious. Each burst should be carefully aimed and limited to 5 to 7 rounds. Wasteful firing is prohibited." This rationing created tactical consequences. Disciplined burst fire created the distinctive sound Americans recognized. More critically, gaps between bursts gave American forces seconds to maneuver, identify positions, and bring overwhelming return fire. Logistical advantages extended throughout the weapons systems. American machine gun crews received extensive training on standardized weapons at facilities across the United States. Training consumed vast ammunition quantities, with some machine gun schools firing thousands of rounds per student during qualification. Japanese machine gun training suffered from ammunition shortages even during peacetime. Limited training time, inadequate ammunition, and constant personnel turnover meant crew quality declined steadily. By 1944, many crews deployed with fewer than 100 practice rounds fired during training. Some had never fired their weapons before combat assignment. American supply chains delivered complete system support to forward areas. Spare barrels, spare parts, cleaning kits, and specialized tools arrived in organized depots on every captured island. Trained armorers accompanied frontline units, providing immediate repair capabilities. Mobile ordnance companies rebuilt weapons in field workshops. Japanese supply lines, harassed by submarines and aircraft, struggled to deliver basic ammunition. Spare parts rarely arrived through broken supply systems. A damaged Type 92 might remain out of service for months waiting for parts. This created declining firepower while American firepower grew stronger. But numbers and logistics only partially explain American dominance. The real advantage manifested when these weapons were employed according to doctrine refined through training. American infantry doctrine, taught at Fort Benning's Infantry School and incorporated into field manuals, called for machine guns to form the base of fire around which rifle units maneuvered. This was fundamental doctrine drilled into every officer and non-commissioned officer. Every infantry company had weapons platoons containing multiple machine gun sections. The process of establishing machine gun positions was methodical. Upon occupying defensive positions, section leaders conducted reconnaissance identifying fields of fire, determining optimal positions, and creating range cards marking distances to terrain features. Multiple machine guns were positioned so beaten zones overlapped, creating continuous fire across likely approaches. When Japanese infantry attacked American positions, they encountered these interlocking fields of fire. The result was systematic destruction. Japanese tactical doctrine, developed during China fighting and refined through Southeast Asia victories, emphasized aggressive close assault relying on surprise, speed, and hand-to-hand combat. This doctrine had proven effective against Chinese forces with limited automatic weapons and against colonial troops lacking weapons and training. Against American machine gun positions, these tactics became suicide. Japanese infantry would advance, often at night, attempting to close before defenders could react. but American positions were established with machine guns covering all approaches. Trip flares illuminated advancing troops. Mortar illumination turned night into day. Then machine guns opened fire with volume and intensity Japanese forces had never encountered. The M1919's sustained fire capability meant attacks were broken up hundreds of yards from American lines. A single M1919 with adequate ammunition could engage targets continuously for minutes, firing 500 or more rounds without pause. This created not a defence line, but a wall of lead. Those reaching wire or obstacles encountered final protective fires, concentrated fire from multiple weapons aimed at likely breach points. These fires were pre-registered, guns pre-aimed with range and deflection calculated. When attacks reached these zones, gunners fired along predetermined lines, covering approaches with mathematical certainty. American machine gunners described firing until barrels glowed red, until weapons became almost too hot to touch, while Japanese soldiers continued advancing and dying. The M1919's mechanical reliability meant weapons functioned even under extreme sustained fire conditions. Barrels would be changed during brief lulls, hot barrels dropped into water cans, fresh barrels mounted, belts loaded, firing resumed. The numbers from specific battles demonstrate this with brutal clarity. At the Tenaru River battle, Marines reported firing tens of thousands of rounds from machine guns. Some weapons fired continuously for hours, with only brief pauses for barrel changes. Japanese dead piled high in front of positions, requiring bodies to be pushed aside to maintain fields of fire. At Bloody Ridge on Guadalcanal in September 1942, Marine Gunnery Sergeant John Basilone commanded machine gun sections defending Henderson Field. Over 2 nights of October 24th to 25th, his positions were attacked by approximately 3,000 Japanese infantry from the Sendai Division. When 2 machine guns were knocked out by enemy fire, Basilone personally carried a 90-pound replacement gun through enemy fire to the position. He repaired damaged weapons under fire and personally manned guns until crews could take over. When ammunition ran low, he made multiple trips through fire, bringing ammunition forward. His actions earned him the Medal of Honor, the first enlisted Marine so decorated in World War II. Private Nash Phillips described the scene. Basilone had a machine gun on the go for 3 days and nights without sleep, rest, or food. He was barefoot and his eyes were red as fire. His face was dirty black from gunfire and lack of sleep. His shirt sleeves were rolled up to his shoulders. He had a .45 tucked into his trousers. Those machine guns saved Henderson Field. At the Battle for Henderson Field in late October 1942, Japanese forces launched their largest Guadalcanal offensive with Sendai Division elements attacking over multiple nights. American defenders established machine gun positions in depth. When attacks began, machine gun fire was so intense that assault waves disintegrated before reaching lines. The Japanese 29th Infantry Regiment lost over 2/3 of its strength in one night against positions defended primarily by machine guns. The regimental commander committed suicide the following morning. His recovered diary noted he could not understand how Americans maintained such fire without pause. These patterns repeated across the Pacific. On Tarawa in November 1943, despite heavily fortified Japanese defences, American machine guns could suppress positions, allowing assault teams to close with bunkers. On Saipan in June–July 1944, the final Japanese banzai charge of 3,000 troops was broken by machine gun fire before reaching American lines. On Peleliu in September to November 1944, even elaborate cave defences could be suppressed by machine gun fire while demolitions teams moved forward. On Iwo Jima in February–March 1945, Marines faced perhaps the most sophisticated Japanese defensive system of the war. General Tadamichi Kuribayashi had forbidden wasteful banzai charges and constructed defence in depth. Yet American machine gun superiority remained decisive. Every platoon had machine gun sections establishing suppressive fire positions. company and battalion weapons platoons provided additional support. M1919 and M2 machine guns engaged positions with sustained fire, while assault teams manoeuvred with flamethrowers and demolitions. It was on Iwo Jima that Gunnery Sergeant Basilone was killed on February 19, 1945, the battle's first day. He had led his machine gun section in destroying a Japanese blockhouse and was guiding a tank through a minefield when killed by mortar fire. He was posthumously awarded the Navy Cross, making him the only enlisted Marine in World War II to receive both the Medal of Honor and Navy Cross. The Battle of Okinawa, the last major campaign before atomic bombs ended the war, saw patterns repeated at even larger scale. Japanese forces, totaling over 100,000 troops, defended elaborate positions. American forces, landing with massive firepower including hundreds of machine guns, systematically reduced these positions over 82 days. American forces suffered approximately 12,300 killed and 38,000 wounded. Japanese forces lost over 100,000 killed, including conscripted Okinawans. Even in prolonged battle over difficult terrain against prepared positions, American forces achieved casualty ratios exceeding 8-1 in their favor. These favorable ratios occurred despite American forces conducting offensive operations, typically the costlier form of warfare. When Japanese forces attacked American positions during banzai charges and night assaults, casualty ratios became even more extreme. Night attacks routinely resulted in complete destruction of attacking forces with minimal American casualties. The mathematical reality made Japanese strategy impossible. To break American political will through casualties, Japan would need to kill far more Americans than Japan could afford to lose. But actual results showed the opposite. For every American killed, multiple Japanese died. At these rates, Japanese forces would be destroyed long before American casualties might affect political will. The M2.50 caliber added another dimension of terror. Positioned to cover longer approaches or in anti-aircraft mounts depressed for ground targets, M2s could engage at ranges where Japanese infantry were barely visible. The .50 caliber rounds penetrated coconut log bunkers, punched through palm trees, disabled light vehicles, and destroyed supply points at ranges Japanese weapons could not reach. The distinctive deep hammering rhythm became associated with unstoppable death. Japanese soldiers learned that when they heard that sound, they had seconds to reach cover or die. The psychological impact was profound. Soldiers trained to advance fearlessly found themselves instinctively seeking cover, breaking attacks before developing momentum. The combination of M1919 and M2 created defense in depth. Japanese tactics could not overcome. Outer perimeters were covered by M2s engaging at long range beyond effective rifle range. Middle distances from 400 to 1,000 meters were swept by M1919 SA from prepared positions. Close defense within 200 meters combined M1919 fire with rifles, grenades and mortars. Attacking forces were engaged continuously from entering kill zones until dead, wounded or retreated. Japanese military leadership recognized the problem but could not solve it within industrial constraints. Officers who survived early battles filed reports describing American machine gun fire as superior in volume, accuracy, and sustained capability. Some reports recommended avoiding frontal attacks against prepared positions, suggesting only night infiltration attacks had success chances. But even when commanders understood tactical problems and attempted solutions, they lacked industrial capacity to match American firepower. Producing more machine guns required diverting resources from aircraft, ships, and artillery production, all already inadequate. Most critically, increased machine gun production required corresponding ammunition increases. Japanese industrial capacity was already strained producing ammunition for existing weapons. Chronic ammunition shortages plaguing Japanese forces throughout the Pacific were not planning failures, but inevitable results of industrial capacity simply lacking ability to produce ammunition in quantities modern warfare demanded. Increasing machine gun numbers without solving ammunition production would have been pointless. The versatility of American machine gun systems provided additional advantages. The M1919 was mounted on tanks, half-tracks, jeeps, landing craft, and aircraft. Every American tank had multiple machine guns. The M4 Sherman typically mounted 3, an M1919A, 4 coaxially mounted with the 75mm main gun, a bow-mounted M1919A4 for the assistant driver, and an M2HB .50 caliber on the commander's cupola. Japanese tanks typically mounted 1 or 2 lighter machine guns with limited effectiveness. American half-tracks were particularly effective mobile platforms. The M3 half-track typically mounted an M2 HB .50 caliber plus additional M1919 mounts. The M16 multiple-gun motor carriage mounted 4 M2 HB .50 caliber machine guns on a half-track chassis. Nominally an anti-aircraft weapon, it proved devastating against ground targets. These vehicles could deliver such concentrated fire that troops nicknamed them meat choppers. Landing craft mounted machine guns for suppressing beach defences during final approaches. The LCVP Higgins boat typically mounted 2.30 caliber machine guns. The LCM mounted .50 caliber guns. LSTS mounted multiple machine guns. Even during vulnerable amphibious assault approaches, American forces could deliver suppressive fire. PT boats patrolling Pacific waters carried multiple machine guns for engaging Japanese barges, small craft, and shore targets. These fast patrol boats typically mounted 4.50 caliber machine guns in twin mounts, plus additional weapons in improvised positions. Supply trucks and support vehicles often carried improvised mounts for convoy defense. This ubiquitous presence meant Japanese forces encountered devastating firepower everywhere. No safe rear area, no secure line of communication, no place beyond reach existed. A routine patrol might encounter jeep-mounted machine guns. Companies infiltrating lines might run into half-tracks on security patrol. Nighttime supply runs might be intercepted by PT boats with multiple machine guns. The strategic implications of machine gun superiority extended beyond tactical advantages. Japanese Pacific war planning assumed Japanese forces could inflict casualties breaking American political will, forcing negotiated peace, leaving Japan controlling some conquests. This required engaging American troops in close combat, where superior Japanese fighting spirit could create favorable casualty ratios. American machine gun superiority made this impossible. Battle after battle demonstrated Japanese forces could not close with American positions without catastrophic casualties, far exceeding any losses inflicted in return. On Iwo Jima, often cited as costly for Americans, casualty ratios still heavily favored Americans despite defender advantages. American forces suffered approximately 7,000 killed and 20,000 wounded. Japanese forces lost virtually the entire garrison of over 21,000 men, with only 1,000 captured alive. Even in this battle fought on terrain favoring defenders, Americans killed 3 Japanese soldiers for every American killed. By 1945, as war moved closer to Japanese home islands, the military situation had become desperate. The combined fleet was destroyed, leaving Japan unable to protect shipping or supply garrisons. Strategic bombing was destroying cities and industrial capacity. Submarines had strangled supply lines, creating severe raw material shortages, including steel and chemicals for ammunition. Military production was collapsing while American production continued increasing. Japanese military leadership, recognizing defeat was inevitable, decided to fight on, hoping that by inflicting maximum casualties, they might achieve negotiated peace, preserving the imperial system and preventing occupation. This strategy, called Ketsugo, or decisive battle, called for using all remaining forces, including civilian militia, to defend home islands. The atomic bombs ending the war in August 1945 prevented this final demonstration of American firepower superiority. Had Operation Downfall, the planned invasion, been executed, American forces would have brought tens of thousands of machine guns supported by logistics capable of sustaining operations indefinitely against Japanese forces whose ammunition production had collapsed and whose remaining weapons were preserved for final battle. The M1919 and M2 Browning would have continued doing exactly what they had done on every Pacific island, creating overwhelming firepower that no courage or determination could overcome. Japanese civilians armed with bamboo spears taught to make suicide attacks would have been slaughtered by machine gun fire just as effectively as trained infantry. The casualty ratio would have remained overwhelmingly favorable to Americans. The story of Browning machine guns in the Pacific is ultimately about decisive importance of industrial capacity in modern warfare. Japanese soldiers were brave, skilled in tactics taught, and motivated by beliefs making them willing to die. But courage and skill could not overcome reality that American forces possessed weapons killing them at ranges where they could not fight back, in quantities meaning fire never ceased, supported by logistics ensuring ammunition never ran out. The Japanese soldier charging across the Tenaru sandbar in August 1942 represented everything Japanese military culture valued: courage, determination, obedience, willingness to sacrifice. He charged into machine gun fire from weapons his nation could neither match in performance nor produce in anywhere near equal numbers. His courage was magnificent. His fate was inevitable. In the final accounting, the M1919 and M2 Browning machine guns were tools, products of innovative engineering and massive industrial production. What made them devastating was not the weapons alone, but the entire system producing them, supplying unlimited ammunition, maintaining them with spare parts and trained armourers, and employing them according to doctrine developed through extensive training. The Japanese never stood a chance, not because Japanese soldiers were inferior. By all accounts, they were skilled and determined, but because the entire system supporting American soldiers was so superior that individual courage and skill became almost irrelevant to outcomes. An American machine gun crew with adequate ammunition and logistics support could engage and defeat Japanese forces many times their number. This was demonstrated mathematical reality across hundreds of battles. When the war ended in August 1945, M1919 and M2 machine guns were distributed across the Pacific on hundreds of islands, aboard hundreds of ships, in supply depots from Hawaii to the Philippines. Many would remain in service for decades, seeing combat in Korea and Vietnam. The M2.50 caliber remains in U.S. service today, testament to John Browning's design soundness. The Japanese Type 92 faded into obscurity after the war. Some captured examples were used by Chinese forces in the Chinese Civil War and later Korea. Some ended up in museums or collections, but the weapon was recognized as obsolete, a product of limited industrial capacity and pre-war design philosophy proven inadequate in modern combat. The story beginning on that moonlit sandbar at Guadalcanal, with Japanese soldiers charging into machine gun fire they could not comprehend until too late, was repeated thousands of times across the Pacific. On hundreds of islands, in countless engagements, Japanese forces would advance and American machine guns would fire. The outcome was always the same, because fundamental advantages American forces possessed never changed. Superior weapons, unlimited ammunition, excellent logistics, and comprehensive training created advantages that no tactical adjustment or increase in courage could overcome. The weapons John Browning designed and American industry perfected had created such overwhelming firepower advantage that Japanese defeat became mathematically inevitable. The M1919 and M2 Browning machine guns were not just weapons. They were physical manifestation of American industrial power, proof that in modern warfare, industrial capacity would triumph over individual courage. The Japanese never stood a chance not because they did not fight hard enough or sacrifice enough, but because they fought against a nation whose industrial power could produce weapons in such quantities and employ them with such effectiveness that victory had become impossible before the first battle was ever fought. The mathematics were brutal and undeniable. For every Type 92 machine gun Japan produced, America produced more than 10 M1919s plus additional M2s. For every ammunition round Japanese industry struggled to manufacture, American industry produced dozens. For every trained Japanese crew killed and replaced by inadequately trained replacements, American training centers graduated fully trained crews who had fired thousands of practice rounds. These ratios, multiplied across every weapon system, every unit, and every battle, made the outcome inevitable. The Japanese soldiers who charged in August 1942 were brave men charging into a future they could not understand, where industrial capacity mattered more than fighting spirit, where automatic weapons firing continuously made traditional infantry tactics suicidal, where American industrial might translated directly into firepower that could not be overcome through courage alone. This is the story of how America won the Pacific War. The answer lies in factories in Saginaw and Buffalo producing hundreds of thousands of machine guns. It lies in ammunition plants producing billions of rounds. It lies in training centers teaching thousands of gunners. It lies in logistics systems delivering weapons and ammunition across thousands of ocean miles. And ultimately, it lies in the M1919 and M2 Browning machine guns that translated all that industrial capacity into sustained automatic fire that Japanese forces could not withstand. The Japanese never stood a chance because they faced the M1919 and M2 Browning machine guns, backed by American industrial might that could produce these weapons and supply them with ammunition without limit. In the end, courage could not overcome firepower, and spirit could not defeat industrial capacity. The machine guns proved this truth on 1,000 Pacific battlefields, writing the war's history in spent shell casings and empty ammunition belts.